Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface. But if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges that Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. This is the Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. Welcome, dear listeners, to our series of short haunts. A shot of scary, just for you. So grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, or maybe something stronger, because this is Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts, Spirit in the Hospital. Over the 4 years in which the Haunted UK Podcast has been up and running, we've told stories from hundreds of members of the public. Ordinary people, just like you and me, some of whom have never had a belief in the paranormal, let alone expected to be witness to something completely unexplainable. The paranormal isn't ruled or governed by race, religion, sex, profession, or location. Instead, it can make itself known to anyone, anywhere. So many of us have wandered the corridors and rooms of allegedly haunted stately homes and castles, and neither seen nor experienced anything at all. Yet others have seemingly walked away after witnessing events which have changed their view of the world around them forever. Paranormal investigators and ghost hunters get permission to roam around some of the creepiest places on Earth, such as abandoned castles, manor houses, old factories, and even long-since closed psychiatric hospitals. But what if you worked in one of these places before their closure, and before nature had a chance to take the land and the building back? I've long felt that stories from people who work in the emergency services and the armed forces are absolutely fascinating. That's not to say that all our listeners who've sent in their experiences into the show aren't just as good, if not better. But so many of those who work in the professions just mentioned are trained to deal with situations which many of us would find difficult to deal with. It's one of these amazing people whose story is the subject of this short haunt. A man named Peter, who worked in and around the operating theatres of now long since gone hospitals in our capital city. We've had our fair share of stories from nurses and other employees who work or worked in one of the many NHS and private hospitals dotted throughout the UK, and some of them are truly bone-chilling. Stories such as the employee who was in a lift when it suddenly went down to the morgue, and upon the doors opening, met a young girl who had died in a car accident a matter of hours earlier. Or the security guard who, after his sudden death due to a heart attack, continued to do his rounds, making sure that the nurses who were outside having a cigarette or making their way to their cars were safe. So many doctors and nurses have reported walking past hospital rooms and seeing people sitting next to patients who are very ill, only to find that no one is in there when they quickly pop in to say hello. So many lives come to an end in our hospitals, be it by accidents, illnesses, or natural causes, and the operating theatre is a place where, unfortunately, surgeons sometimes lose their battle to save the lives of those who find themselves in these rooms. But enough from me. Let's hand this over to Peter, who'll take it from here. Dear Haunted UK, thanks for the podcast, which I always look forward to immensely. As other people have said, the listener stories are my favourite, and here's mine. I love a good spooky story as much as the next person, but in my 62 years, only one truly weird thing has happened to me. This is going to take a while, so put another log on the fire and top up your glass. 40 years ago, I worked in the operating complex of a large London General Hospital, the now-demolished Greenwich District Hospital. It wasn't an old hospital, and there were no stories about ghosts as far as I knew. But one part of the hospital was different. The operating theatre complex was big and busy. 6 theatres, most of which had morning and afternoon lists, plus emergency surgery out of normal business hours. Theatres 1 and 2 were for general surgery, 3 was for gynecological operations, 4 was for eyes, and 5 and 6 were orthopedic theatres. There were up to 60 operations per day. Anyone who worked there for long enough had a story about something strange happening, mostly things moving in ways they shouldn't. These things usually happened at night or at other quiet times, although there was one funny occurrence during the day one time. In a busy theatre, between ops, the medical staff were preparing for the next patient, and the cleaning staff were doing their thing. Suddenly, a young student nurse screamed. All heads turned to her, then looked in the direction she was staring. The cotton strip that had tied a cleaner's dress at the back in a bow was being slowly pulled. The cleaner thought it was someone larking around, until the scream. About 8 people saw that. Such things happen, or perhaps I should say were noticed, about once a year or so. I was part of the ancillary staff, and my job was to supply the theatres with instruments from the large storeroom, sterilise instruments, and help out in the theatres when required. The shifts were 8 a.m. to 4 p.m, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m, and the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. night shift, which I had to do 1 week in 7. I'd been working there for about 3 years when one night I was working around the back in the store area. At the back of each theatre were 2 sets of cupboards, each with 4 doors. Sterile instruments were put into these cupboards, and dirty material was collected from the other cupboards. All the doors were closed. I went around the front of the theatres for a couple of minutes, and when I returned, every door was wide open. 48 doors, all open to their fullest extent. I went straight back and asked the nurses if they'd been in the store, knowing full well that they hadn't. There was no explanation. But that's not my main story. I didn't witness those doors being opened, so that doesn't count. How's your glass, by the way? I was on nights 1 week, starting at 10 p.m, and I was having a game of pool and a beer in the hospital club before work. Just a weak beer, mind. The phone behind the bar rang, and it was for me. My colleague on the 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift warned me that the place was like a MASH unit. Cold surgery had run on, and there were several emergency operations coming in. He'd been so busy that he hadn't been able to clear a backlog of instruments to be sterilized, so I was in for a very busy night. I agreed to go in early and left the club at around 9:30. It was indeed extremely busy when I got there. It took me a few hours to sterilize the backlog, all the time dashing back and forth into the theatres to help lift and position patients, and keeping the surgical team supplied with what they needed. By about 1 a.m, things had quietened down, but I still had to fill the hatches with instruments for the next day's surgery. 6 theatres with full lists. The main store was about 20 yards long and 6 yards wide. Along 3 walls were the shelves floor to ceiling, full of instruments, either on metal trays in double-wrapped linen or in smaller packs of instruments for specific operations. For example, for a hysterectomy, you'd need a general set 2, plus a hysterectomy set, plus drains, sutures, swabs, catheters, and all the rest of it. Each surgeon had their favorite devices, like forceps or scalpel handles of various types. It was about 1:30 a.m, and I was steadily working my way through the lists, when I heard a thump, like something had bumped into a wall. I looked up. Suddenly a pack of instruments came off a high shelf and landed on the floor 2 yards from me. The higher shelves were recessed and not as deep as the lower ones containing the biggest general sets, so if anything had toppled off a higher shelf, it would have simply landed on a lower, deeper shelf. In any case, the pack, a gallbladder pack weighing about 3 or 4 kilos, hadn't toppled off. It had flown off, and I'd seen it with my own eyes. I heard myself say, "Do that again." Funny now, but I didn't feel afraid at all. This was my place. I'd been there for years. Busy though I was, I sat down and had a word with myself. I told myself to fix this incident in my memory, as memory fades with time. I also put the pack back on the shelf and tried to coax it off, but as I said before, it just couldn't have happened that way. I didn't tell anyone what had happened for many years. Being young, I was afraid of what people might say, and I didn't want to be ridiculed. I didn't even tell the theatre staff. I'm not sure why. Now I have much more life behind me than in front of me, and I don't care what anyone thinks. Best wishes, Peter. So who or what could have been tormenting the people in these rooms? The spirit of a person who died in that hospital? Or maybe even an ex-doctor or nurse who passed away in the very place that they worked in? It's fair to say that hospitals have a strange aura and atmosphere during the late night and early morning hours, when the hustle and bustle of the busy day finally comes to an end. A number of times, I've found myself walking along the quiet corridors of certain West Midlands hospitals alone, having the quiet only interrupted by the sounds of the many electrical systems which power the hospital and the machines which are used to treat the countless patients within. I've often wondered myself as I walk along if there are spirits who roam these corridors and wards. Would I have known the difference between the apparition of a person and the real thing? So many people have stated that when they encountered a ghost they were as solid-looking as you and me, and they only realized what they had seen when said spirit either disappeared or walked through a wall. Even at 62 years of age, Peter still isn't sure what he encountered. Was it a poltergeist or a spirit? We simply can't be sure which, but one thing is certain, and that is that Peter really did have a number of strange and unexplained experiences. And the question I have for all of you out there who are listening to this short haunt is, if you have either worked or still work in a hospital, would you be prepared to share your story? If so, the next person who could feature in a haunted UK podcast short haunt could be you.